Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Felicia Baca. I'm the director of the Salt Lake City Arts Council. The mission of the Arts Council is to promote, present, support artists and arts activities in the community and support the development, awareness, and access of the arts for the community. And we have been around since the 70s, and we are nestled within the Department of Economic Development in Salt Lake City. And what I really like about our approach to economic development is that it's a really human-centered approach, right? A lot of the time when we talk about economic development, we're talking about return on investment, and we're talking about increasing the tax base and things of that nature. But what we also really care about is building community. We know that when people belong and are included and are enjoying their neighbors and are celebrating, that they can really thrive within their communities. So that's a really important approach to the way that we see economic development in communities. And so we're going to talk about development today. And so for us, it's not just about infrastructure or building physical things. It's about building communities with people and building things together. We really know that the arts are intersectional, and that's something that we hold true. So while there's economic benefits to the arts, it was in 2019, 4.3% of our GDP, and combined more than tourism and construction industry in total, which is really kind of an astonishing number. But we also know that the arts are the things that bring people together. It's a lens through which we understand people. It's a lens through which we understand culture, through which we celebrate and connect with our neighbors. And when we're doing that, we thrive in all kinds of ways. A lot of our panelists today, too, are also going to talk about development and all the incredible things that artists do in the service of communities. And we know that people want to be in neighborhoods where arts are, where artists are making things and activating those communities. But I also want to challenge this group to think about the ways in which the economy can be in service to artists. Something that's really important to us is that artists are, that we have a stake in that development of spaces for artists, that artists are paid fair wages, that they have a livable income, they have equal benefits to all kinds of workers, and that we really prioritize that. So this is a reciprocal relationship between the community and with artists. So I'd love you to think about that, this discussion through that lens. And thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to the Utah Museum of Contemporary Art. This place is near and dear to me. I've worked here 2 different times in my life, and I really appreciate this incredible community asset. So please stick with us afterwards to enjoy the shows. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you for that incredible introduction, and thank you to the Arts Council for really leading the way here in Salt Lake City in terms of creating that community. I'm so grateful for everything you've done to really enhance our community and, to your point, create that community. We would not be here without you, so thank you. Nice to meet all of you here in this room. My name is Sarah Young, and I am our District 7 Salt Lake City Council member. Incredibly honored to be sharing this opportunity today with some amazing panelists that I'm going to quickly introduce, and then we'll dive into today's conversation. So we have joining us here today Chris Parker with the Give Group as the Executive Director. Welcome, Chris. We also have Kim Martinez, artist and community activist. Excited to have you here today, Kim. With me, a woman who needs no introduction, our mayor, Erin Mendenhall. Excited to have you, Mayor. Next to me, we have Brooke Smart, an artist from the community. And then seated next to her, Shailene Gee, Zion's Bake Senior Vice President of Community Engagement. So welcome. So we'll jump right in. I'm going to start off with a question to the full panel. And if you can kind of give us a rapid response on how does Salt Lake City benefit from development projects that truly integrate arts, culture, and creative industries into the fabric of their projects? And or tell us about one of your favorite development projects, either ones you've participated in or you've encountered in the world that best speak to the intersections of our creative industries and our growth as a city. So Chris, why don't we start with you?
Hello. Awesome. Sure thing. And honestly, thank you for having us, both you, Mocha, and other panelists. Generally speaking, a lot of development is very apparent in why it was built and who it's for, candidly. And I think when we engage something beyond maybe the economic reason most buildings are built, and we make something that clearly is for someone exterior to the building. If you build a multifamily building that has a great mural on it, or you build unnecessary from an economic perspective park space around a building that might have an economic use, you are stating that this land is for everybody. This development is for everybody. It's not just the people being housed within it. And so I think the density of those sorts of developments within a city is very much why a city feels the way that it does, that thing you didn't have to do but did. As far as developments that I really enjoy, over time, I've really grown to appreciate the places where the directive is to make makers. So what is the infrastructure of a city that is targeted toward making it easier or a downhill role to create creatives? Because that takes as much work as the creativity itself sometimes, and without that support, the creatives leave or they cannot engage in their activities, and you end up with somewhat dull or drab places to live without it. So there's several examples of that, but I'll just say a category rather than a specific one.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Kim, what are your thoughts?
Okay. Hi. First of all, I'm a professor at the University of Utah, so I've been involved for the past 20-ish years developing murals within the community with University of Utah students. So since 2003, over 400 university majors have been creating murals within the city of South Salt Lake City. And with this, our goals of this is to bring the community together to work with the artists. So in essence, when we go into a community, we are very much invested in working with the community directly by holding meetings and talking with the community members before we even start. And then that way we can get firsthand experiences to what the community wants. And sometimes we find out that we have invested in a community and don't realize what our investment is until years after the project is done. For instance, a few years ago, I was at Central Civico working on another mural project when a young man came up to me and we started talking about murals. And I told him that I was a muralist. And he, asked me what projects I had done, and I started mentioning them. And then I started to see tears well up in his eyes. And I said, wait a minute, are you one of those kids that used to come by when we were painting? And he said, yes, I was. So we would hand him a paintbrush and let him paint on the wall with us every week that he came by. And he said, I was new to the country, I didn't speak the language, and I felt like an outsider until I started painting with you guys. So that's really what this is about for me, is to bring that kind of sense of community and to give everybody a place to use art as a vehicle for social change.
Great, thank you. I appreciate calling out some of our youngest members of the community in terms of creating that connection. So thanks, Kim. Mayor Mendenhall.
Thanks, Sarah. I want to start by telling you I just had a crown prep. And so if I start, drooling or if I seem somewhat impaired, I'm going to be okay. It'll be, by the end of this hour, it should be a lot better than it is right now. The Arts Council of Salt Lake City is exceptionally good at weaving these elements and really community and heart into the projects that we fund and solicit and the artists that we endeavor to support all of the time. Earlier this year, I think it was in the early spring, we unveiled 25 8-foot-tall fish jumping out of the ground along the Jordan River. And the Arts Council organized a walk with our economic development team with kids from Edison Elementary who had colored and named the fish before they were erected in the ground. The story, like Kim just told, is woven into almost every piece of public art, from the whale to the dairy cats at Stimblick Park. And that's what I love about the city. When I go to the suburbs that are cookie cutter, I don't know who they are. I don't feel the community. I don't know what the values of the community are beyond how manicured a front lawn might be. But when we put art from our people into our public spaces, then we say who we are as a community and what we're willing to question. And that's, I think, one of the crown jewels of what identifies Salt Lake City and what our character is.
Thank you. Brooke, I'd love to hear your feedback as an artist.
Well, I do want to echo what's been said. My favorite projects are those that really enhance the community and even just the neighborhood that the public art piece is going in. Some of my favorite public art experiences, my own, I've done 4, I think, projects now for the Maven District, and I love the freedom that I get with those projects because I know that they're going on buildings and they're going in neighborhoods that will appreciate that work, and that the work that I'm creating alongside Tessa Arneson has a message, and it's creating the work is almost as cool as having the work there afterwards, because you are involved with people that come by the murals that you're painting. They want to know, why you're painting it. Often there are people that don't have art in their lives in any other way, and so creating that public art really adds that cultural element to their lives where maybe they're not asking for it before that, but then it impacts them in different ways. Another project that I worked on that I thought really special was with Evo in the Granary District, and it was really special just because they really focused on bringing local artists, creating something really special in buildings that existed and that they enhanced to really revitalize that area.
And Shailene, we'll conclude with you. I know Zions has been such an amazing supporter of art and engagement here in the community. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having us. I think this is a really, it's a topic really close to my heart. I do work at a bank, so I think I'm supposed to say that the arts are good for economic development and business. We also partner with lots of big organizations like Intermountain Health, so I think I'm supposed to say they enhance well-being and all that sort of thing. But I think the real fundamental answer to the question that I've seen personally and professionally is that projects like the ones being discussed invite people to have a relationship with the city and to understand themselves and the relationship that they have with their lives and other people through the city and the built environment. And the profound effects of that are really transformative. I think a lot of these projects, people are, when they're done well, people are really compelled to them. They want to be present in these buildings and places. They want to linger. And when they leave, they miss them and they want to come back. So it's the life flow and the heartbeat of a city. My favorite project, I know I have 10 seconds, I'll just mention, I first learned what urban planning was. I had no idea what it was. I was like 25 years old. I also didn't really know what mayors did. And I didn't know what developers did. I thought they were like construction companies. But I was in Chicago and I met an artist, and I'll talk about him later, but he wanted to do a project. And he said, I need someone to help me with real estate and finance and cities. And I'm like, well, I don't know anything about any of that, so I can't help you. And he said, well, can't you learn? And I said, yes, I can learn. And it went from there, and maybe we'll talk about that in a second.
Excellent. Thank you. And so let's build on your comment about it being, these buildings and art installations about the heart of the city. Mayor, I'm going to come to you and then Chris with the following question. So where does the soul of a building, a community, or a city reside? Does it rely on the creative infrastructure of a community? And why do some areas or cities flourish more than others?
Those are big questions, Sarah. But the first one is easy enough, which is the soul of a place or a neighborhood is in the people who are there. And I think that when you feel a place that has a sense of place, that has some identity, even if you can't put a finger on it yet, you feel like there's a kitchen table that the community comes around. And that space in my neighborhood is 9th and 9th. And we have a large mammal, a very beautiful, colorful mammal that I credit Felicia Baca and the Arts Council and Advisory Board with bringing to us just a little while ago. And by the way, if you haven't been around the roundabout lately, the neighbor on the north or the southeast corner of the Five Corners has wrapped a giant tree in purple lights for the holiday, and the whale has a lovely backdrop right now. So I think that there is more of a sense of a table, that family table of a community, when there's public art that defines a space. Some of it's definitely small businesses, I think, in Salt Lake City. So when I travel, and even when I go through our own city, but when I go to other places, I'm looking for public art, walkable spaces, and local businesses that I haven't seen anywhere else. And I think those ingredients bring the family around the table, that family being community.
Thank you. Chris, let's move to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you find that soul in a community and how art contributes to that.
Sure. I mean, we'll talk about souls in an art exhibit. And also, thank you. I had an under and over on minutes to whale this conversation was going to have. I will say, though, I've really appreciated, the whale, maybe not artistically, although I happen to like it. But the reaction to the whale was all a conversation, to Shalene's point, about, well, that's not us, or that is us, or who are we, and is this appropriate given us? And I think that's kind of the conversations art at its best inspires, and is a pretty good lead-in to where the soul of a city might be. It's where we feel most us. I kind of think of our lives as more or less an expenditure of time. I mean, that's really what we're all engaged in. And if you think about that visually, it's almost like we're paintbrushes that watercolor our way through cities. And as far as where geographically, at least, that soul of a city might be, it might be where our minutes soak in. Where are the places that uniquely have us stop for no other reason other than to be in them? And somewhat of the density of those types of places really does make a great or a not great city, in my opinion. Where do I feel most like myself, or who I want to be, or among? And if you can answer those questions in a meaningful way, you probably have found some art or creativity in that moment as well.
Thank you, Chris. I really want to build on that idea of, community and where do I want to be and who do I want to, spend that space with. So Kim, I'm going to come to you, and then Shalene, what does a process of mutual knowledge exchange between artists, developers, public officials, and the folks with money look like?
One of the things I always think about when I'm getting ready to make a piece of art that's going to go out into a community is, what is the site of this public memory, right? I mean, I think it's really super important that we consider who is there, who's in the soil, who's part of the soil, where did they come from? I'm involved with a group in Los Angeles called SPARK, which is a Social Political Resource Artist Resource Center. And they've been doing this project since the 1970s called the Great Wall of Los Angeles, which talks about the historical racial divisions in Los Angeles. So for the past 40-ish years, and we're continuing to build on this monument, is that we're giving voices to people who may not have had a voice. So sometimes with public art, we can just get caught up in decoration, but when do we, make the decision that we're going to be talking about the soul of the community that lives there, so that we're creating monuments to those? That's one of the things that I'm always looking at when I'm developing projects.
Thank you, Kim. So Shalene, same question to you. What does that process look like?
I love this question. Mutual knowledge exchange is a really important phrase for me in everything. that I think about and do. And I'll finish my story about the artist who asked me if I could learn. So this was an artist, as a way of answering, this was an artist in Chicago. I'm Utah native, but I was in Chicago for work and school. It was an artist named Theaster Gates. He's a potter, and he's an urban planner. And he had an office next to mine and came in with this question, could I help him with his project? And his project was he wanted to go around in the south side of Chicago and the west side of Chicago in some of the inner city neighborhoods, and he wanted to buy vacant land and vacant buildings, homes, banks that had been foreclosed on, all kinds of infrastructure. And he wanted to redevelop them and turn them into living and cultural spaces that were both, as he phrased it, aesthetically pleasing and also economically pleasing. And it was his way of trying to think about how to give some of those neighborhoods a second life. Again, he said, I'm going to need help with mayors and developers and lawyers and people with money. And that's when I said, I don't know any of those people. And he's like, well, we're going to learn together. And so it was a process of mutual knowledge exchange. What does it look like when all those people get together? I think a guiding principle is when you have so many different people with so many different values, motivations, they have different definitions of benefit and risk. They think about time differently as well. People from those sectors are thinking about time in all kinds of different ways. But the guiding principle is that you assume that everyone sitting at the table thinking about this project has something profoundly important that they can teach everybody else, and that there's also something profoundly important that they don't know that they need to learn from everybody else at the table. And so the process of figuring that out is what I think makes projects like this come together. And if you can't figure that out together, typically they'll stall.
Can I add something? Shalene, I've never heard you tell that story. I don't know that part of your background, but you still operate that way at the table on the part of potential investor through banks or development when you worked with the county years ago. And I think it's worth speaking up in this moment with this crowd to say that I think we are uniquely fortunate in Salt Lake City to have people in the development world like Chris and Shalene to an extent, financially at least for sure, and in many other ways, who are pushing questions all the time and growing the table and are dissatisfied with the way that things have been done in the past. And we should not take this for granted, that the people who represent our banks and development and what we're going to do next from that aspect, some of whom are in the crowd tonight, what is it, morning? I'm fine.
It's post-crown prep time.
I'm ready for a nap right now. Anyway, we're uniquely fortunate, and to hear you tell that story and to see that you still bring that kind of learning curiosity, but you expect it of others when we're figuring out how to do this that we have not done yet. I'm really fortunate.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
You too.
So, Shalene, you mentioned this lens of profound learning, and I think it lends us to our next question, and I'm going to start with Chris and then come to the mayor. So, Chris, how do you feel about ourselves and community when walking down a deeply considered or expressive street? What are the relationships between craftsmanship and art and architecture and sculpture, for example?
I love reading that question and then right above it, seeing the 2-minute response only. I think to a certain degree, if you walk down just an amazing place, be it a street or other condition, you feel a deep sense of care. There were minutes spent on that space that didn't need to be spent on that space, and I think what that does to us is it creates a moment of safety, but it also creates an affirmation that caring's worth it. That there's something at the end of being human toward a point that isn't necessarily just our basic survival that makes it worth it. And I think that spills over into almost every other portion of our life. As far as the difference between craftsmen and art, generally speaking, I think both are very talented words, but craftsmanship is burdened with function as well as form. And really has to. This is why many of my favorite architectural friends are very conflicted people, generally speaking, because every single day, it's how beautiful can something be while still serving its purpose. I often think that kind of the hardest job in the world would be to be like a building manager for a Frank Gehry building. I mean, you can imagine him getting that call, hey, there's a leak coming from somewhere. I have no idea where on this structure it might be coming from. But really what you get in really deeply considered streets, I think, is some combination of both. You have things that do serve a purpose. We do need to live and eat and breathe and have hospitals. But uniquely, we're stilled by places that do those functions, but do them in a way that admit there's a human being going to those functions, other than some sort of biological need being served by a street. And honestly, it makes walking generally worth doing. It makes living generally worth doing to have some person who you've never met care about your moment right then as you are walking through something that they created.
Yeah, I appreciate the consideration of the care for the individuals who are in those spaces. Mayor, what are your thoughts?
3 separate iterations come to mind. One is that sometimes we build a space that's deeply considered, like Regent Street between 1st and 2nd South, and the mid-block that pops through from Main Street onto Regent. And it's amazing. And there's art and there's historic elements, and it's a festival street with no curbs. But honestly, I feel sad when I walk down it and there's no one there. Because without anyone there, it's like, ooh, did we miss? What did we miss here? Another aspect, maybe not the other side of the coin, but a different place, are a lot of neighborhood blocks in this city that have no public art, haven't had sidewalks widened since they were poured decades and decades ago. There's nothing necessarily special from an infrastructure standpoint, but oh my goodness, have the people who live there made these spaces curated and considerate and thoughtful. And whether that's like mini libraries, or my daughter likes to find fairy houses that people build in their front yards, or just a beautiful landscaping or something really creative. The different colors of houses, you can feel curated in a space that had no overarching theme like the Regent Street creation did. And then I think third is when you visit a place, there's some combination therein. There were some investments you can tell maybe they're aged, but they're so well loved and utilized that they've had a ripple effect on what the community has done on top of whatever big capital project went in some time ago. And I think it's fun to feel the same resonance among those different kinds of curated spaces. And it's about belonging and curiosity, even if it's your first time there, that there's something more here than meets the eye, and it's about the love and care that's gone into a place.
Thank you. We too hunt for fairy houses while we're out walking in Salt Lake. And so I think having those different scales of how art, small and large, can impact our community is really important. Let's turn our attention to some of the expertise of our artists. And so, Brooke, I'll start with you and then move to Kim. As a working artist, what do you feel you need developers, community leaders, or funders to know about best practices of working with you and in the field of the arts? What have been qualities of your most successful collaborations in development or community projects?
That is also a big question, but so as an artist, and I've done a lot of projects here in Salt Lake. The most successful projects that I've had are projects where the person I'm working with, whether it be a developer, or an owner of a business, or a private individual, the best is when you can kind of get on the same page as to, what is the inspiration for this piece? What what are our goals? Are we using this piece to, enrich the community? Are we telling the story of the people and the work that has gone on in that community? The best is when we can get on that same page and when we can figure out, the best way to make this building, whether it's, already a really beautifully designed building, or maybe, I've painted on sort of warehouse-looking buildings, and what is the goal for this art, and what is the relationship that we can, how can we work together to create something that really could, create that creativity and that curiosity that Mayor was talking about. Some of these neighborhoods don't have any art. Some of the neighborhoods have so much art. What is a unique way that we can enrich that community? Some of my favorite projects have been where I've done the research on that neighborhood. Who has lived here before? What did it look like 100 years ago? And how can I really tell that story and also make it fresh and new and add something to that community? So working with developers and community leaders, and just getting on the same page, I guess. Yeah, how can we create something special, and how can we utilize our resources to the best degree?
Thank you, Brooke. Kim, what are your thoughts?
And so I think that there's a little bit of a difference. So for me, I'm more of a community-based arts maker, right? So I'll share the experience with you, one of the projects I did in Murray City. So I worked with Murray City, Murray School District, the University of Utah MAT program, which is the Masters of Art Teaching, and University of Utah students. And there was about 2,800 of us, 2,800 people involved in this project. So what we did is we went into, first we came up with the theme with the community leaders. The developers typically aren't as involved in community-based projects because there's not as much money, quite frankly. So we worked with them, and within that, with the district, we worked together to come up with a theme, which is We Are Murray. So the students, we went into like the elementary schools, we worked with 9 different schools, and then we did, had the children do drawings. And then we worked with high school and senior high school students. And then we created a different kind of mural making, meaning that we developed a new process using technology so that they could become transportable. So that way everybody, and then we bus students into a mansion in Murray so that everybody could participate. So it was like an amazing, including community members. So it was more about the process of making, even though they ended up with these really great artifacts that we could then move around within their schools, but it became about the process more so than whether or not it was making money for the community or whether or not, people could enjoy it for its beauty. But it gave a certain amount of, self-esteem to the participants and then a voice to the community that may not have been heard before. So that's one of the goals that I think we have to think, that I think about when I'm making community-based art versus percent for art.
Thank you, Kim. And so in kind of continuing the thread around process, but pivoting from the artist's perspective, Shailene, we're going to come to you. Why are you, a person who works for a bank, interested in these questions? So why do you care that artists and developers are able to talk about them together and with you?
Well, you've heard me talk about that a little bit. I haven't always worked for a bank. Sometimes I'm surprised that I work for a bank. But I've always worked since the time of that story with people who do have resources, financial resources of various sorts. Money is a thing. I like working at a bank for a couple of different reasons. It's probably one of the most rewarding jobs that I've had, given what I like to do. Banks, as you know, do a range of things. They give loans. You can open an account. They fund businesses and things like that. They fund developers' projects. They can invest in them. Congratulations, by the way, on yours. And but they also care deeply, and they have a lot of information about how people are doing, including artists. So banks know, can an artist live in a city? Can they afford it? Can they afford a studio space? Can a university faculty member afford to bring students here or programs here? If not, what's the gap? What's needed? Banks, as some of you may know, also have a federal mandate. They need to reinvest back into certain communities because they did not behave well in them in the past. And that's an understatement. But then they also do something called community development, which is kind of a boring thing that people associate with block grants and things like that. But really, community development is a mandate of most banks, especially community ones, to help work with members of the community to create community and get projects and initiatives off the ground that the community wants. And so that lens really gives us a lot of information about what's needed and how we and others can help. And we also try to bring others to the table.
Thank you. And so I think, understanding that role related to investment transitions us to our next question. We have incredible experts up here, and we also have interested community members here with us in the audience today. So Brooke, I'm going to direct this question to you and then bring it to the mayor as well for kind of the city perspective. But how can artists, creatives, and art and culture organizations get connected to future projects? If an artist hasn't worked with developers in the past, how do they get a foot in the door?
You can agree to speak on a panel about art and development. Yeah, nice to meet you. That is a very good question. There are opportunities through Utah Arts and Museums. You can look at, that's a great way for developers to sort of reach out to get artists for their projects. I've done projects before. I did one with Recursion at the Gateway where they found 4 different artists and they paid each one of us to do sketches, which I think, that shouldn't be a novel idea, paying for sketches. They paid each of us to do sketches, and then they were able to actually choose, this is the direction we want to go. Because I know a lot of, maybe developers or not everybody is an art director and kind of doesn't know what they want until they see it. So maybe I think doing the research and finding, artists that do have substance. Not all mural artists are created equally. Maybe they are created equally. Not all murals are maybe at the same level, but looking at artists that maybe speak to what you want your project to become, and looking at artists that have put in the time and the skill and the effort to create really beautiful, meaningful projects, and then possibly finding a few and then kind of seeing, okay, this is the direction I want to go. To actually find these jobs, it often is, most of my jobs come from I've created this mural, and then I am reached out to by another project developer. There are great resources here in Utah, actually, and such a beautiful, wonderful community of artists in Salt Lake, especially. Once I started painting murals, I realized there are just these wonderful, amazing people that also do what I do and love what I love. And it's such a supportive community. I've had projects come to me through other artists who have been approached by someone and, it's not the right project for them, but then they will recommend me. And I love that too, having that openness and that supportive aspect to the arts here in Salt Lake is so great. It's not super cutthroat. It's very supportive and wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate you recognizing and kind of calling out that role of community. Felicia started the conversation about the importance of community in art. And so really kind of hitting home that being a member of that community really helps to open up doors for future opportunities as well. Really is an important message. Mayor, I know you've invested so much in the city. And so do you have any other resources or programs you'd like to call out?
Yeah, thanks to the council approving it. We have increased our budget for the Arts Council. It was 1% for art, and now it's 1.5%. And that 0.5 goes a long way. So we want you to take that money. And if you are an artist, or anybody, if you're here, you should be following the Salt Lake City Arts Council. And especially if you're an artist and you're looking for those kind of opportunities, we do solicitations for artists. We often require or reserve some of those commissions for local artists, if it's a national call or regional. So please do. Our money is there, and we don't want to build a city without you. I want to mention also that we have a pre-qualified pool of artists who we can use on a easier basis. Those pools last for 3 years, and I think our next one expired. We're in the midst of one since January, and this pool goes till December of 2025. So if you're interested in becoming a pre-qualified artist with us, connect with our Arts Council. But I have a lot of friends here from Downtown Alliance that I see. And another thing that comes to mind besides the Salt Lake City Arts Council is a city exploration trip that the Downtown Alliance puts together every year. I won't ask you to let the cat out of the bag where we're going to go this year, because I don't know yet. But it's typically in September. And something unique that happened, thanks to the Downtown Alliance crew, is coming up with sponsorship for artists and makers in Salt Lake who might never dream of going on a Downtown Alliance city exploration with developers and city people, to be funded to come along. And that's been happening the last, I think, 2 trips now. So this will be our 3rd. So there are sponsored trips. It only happens once a year, and it is the most impactful exploration, I think, that the city does with developers. Typically, we might have a lunch meeting or a Zoom call. We never go out and walk around the city and then sit down and say, what did you see that you like? But we explore these creative places and what we could do better here by traveling for 2 or 3 days together with the Downtown Alliance's leadership. So come with us and check out Downtown Alliance. There's like 6 of them here today. So if you want to come, we'd love to see you there in September.
I like it. It sounds like the mayor just invited all of us on a learning experience, and so I appreciate that. Mayor, I'm going to stay with you to ask, how can the arts add to placemaking in a neighborhood? Do you have any examples of catalytic projects that have shaped a neighborhood that you want to highlight here in Salt Lake?
The arts are placemaking in neighborhoods. That's what it is. Whether it's hand-painted signs, or sculpture, or mural, or creative infrastructure that is led by artists. That's what is placemaking. And every neighborhood is starting to have these. If you go to the Arts Council homepage, there's an interactive map, and almost all of it's on there right now. I think Marmalade maybe needs one, but you can look at the 8-foot tall 25 fish we installed this year that is so meaningful to the kids at Edison and the community there. I think that it's all over. Even the old Sugar House Beat on Highland Drive, that's like the icon of the neighborhood there, that's been there since I was a kid or before. It's all over. The old couches that are benches, those poor things. They're wonderful, but how do we take care of them? Taking care of art, that's another thing I know the Arts Council probably would like us to talk about, is the funding not only for the capital projects, but to take care of the art that we install. And that's a priority for us to get better about that. Placemaking is art, and the artists have to be in the community in order for that to happen. And if people can't afford to be in the community and make their art there, then we lose that soul.
Thank you. So we are nearing the end of our time here with the panel. So we'll go down the row, starting with Chris. And I'd love for each panelist to kind of respond to, what's the dream? What's the goal? How will we know when we're doing this correctly and consistently? What are your thoughts, Chris?
I think if there was some sort of metric about how hard it is to be a creative in our city, knowing how we were performing on that metric would probably dictate a lot of how much creativity we had in our city. There's, if you look at, say, national acts or international acts in Utah that have gone out and kind of blown up, they've almost all come out of one tiny little venue in Provo called Velour. I was chatting with Kim a little bit earlier today, and she's had an amazing artistic career, and we chatted about a little space in the original art space 30 years ago that allowed her to go on that trajectory. So I'm very interested in, if you want to have deep creativity in your city, what exactly are we doing to till the soil, whatever euphemism you want to do, to prepare the crown for the crown of making it downhill to produce great and meaningful works. And if that's difficult in our city, if that's something that you have to do in your spare time, as opposed to the thing that you do with your main time, then we'll have less of that and we'll be less for it. So I think we'll be very successful as a city if we're known as something uniquely easy to create great things within.
When I started doing this, I started it out with a little city called South Salt Lake. At the time, they didn't have any murals. So what we did is I worked with the Parks and Recs manager, and we got a grant from UTA to beautify the Trax Line corridor. We were so grassroots. I did a little painting. We drove around in his car and looked for the most dilapidated building we could find and asked them if we could paint on the back of his building to make it look nicer. They let us do it. So we did that for several different buildings. I worked in South Salt Lake for about 10 years, and they now have a very strong mural program. It's really a good testament as to what happened, and a lot of that was because of the beginning of the University of Utah students investing in that area. I know that it works because one of the things that happened is sometimes murals get tagged. And so one of the murals got tagged, and one of the residents in the neighborhood had to track me down and call me and tell me that it got tagged the night before, and could I come and fix it? Of course we did, right? But that's what we do, is we walk around the neighborhood when we start a project, we introduce ourselves and let them know who we are and what we're doing there. So I think that's where, we can also be thinking about the grassroots. And it was just a kind of an idea. Nobody really supported us. We were able to find money. And so curiosity to me is one of the big things that helps us all make art and change the social fabric of our culture.
I'm so glad you did that. South Salt Lake is crushing it on the mural scene and the distillery scene. I'm a little jealous. We're going to get there. The conversations like this, where you have these different partners that may not know each other, but in Salt Lake City, many of us do. And cultivating more of this, I think creative things that came out of like the Downtown Alliance saying we should have artists and makers here because we keep going to look at what artists and makers are doing in other cities, and maybe they can't afford to show up to a trip like this. So let's make that possible. That kind of momentum in the city, in any place, I think is indicative of a strong culture who prioritizes art and creatives, not only creating there, but living in these spaces. And we're going to keep doing more and more of that. And that's part of that's money, but mostly it's the vulnerability of each of our levels to say, what are we not doing yet? And what have we been closing our eyes to or not setting the table large enough to include? And I think you're seeing that here. I just want to say one other part, because Shalene works for Scott Anderson. And Scott Anderson is an incredible gift to this community as an arts ambassador and investor. And the level of art that Scott brings and dreams of bringing is mind-blowing, and thank goodness for that. Thank goodness for Brooke and Kim, who are willing to do the grassroots level of knocking on the door of a dilapidated building owner and changing a neighborhood by doing so. So it's the whole spectrum.
Thank you. Brooke, what are your thoughts?
The dream is to create a city where people, they travel here to see and feel that artistic atmosphere. That's what we do when we travel. We go and see all of the public art, and and it livens up the neighborhoods and the communities that it's in. And I love having so many unique voices in terms of who is developing these neighborhoods, and then who the artists that come in and add their voices as well. The goal, the dream is to have Salt Lake, you can turn the corner and have these experiences and hear those voices from all of the different creators that are coming together to make something really special and something worth visiting or living in. Yeah.
All right, and Shailene, we'll give you the final word on this for the panel today.
All right, so the dream. Well, first, thank you for mentioning Scott Anderson. He is a huge advocate of the arts. I think he spends 95% of his time thinking about the arts and about artists. That's absolutely true. Another reason I like to work at the bank. I think the dream for me would come, I see some equilibrium and some will on 3 different planes. A lot of that we've spoken about today. One, we'd have a community where we knew, because we heard, artists could live here, they could work here, they could practice here, they could meet other artists here. Other artists would come to see us, and so there'd be viability there. The second one would be related to the question about real estate development. And so I dream of a moment, maybe we're already here, I don't know, when instead of asking how can we integrate the arts into real estate development, real estate developers are like, how do I integrate myself into that amazing art situation? And so we reverse kind of the power structure there and some of the demand. And then the third one is really related to some things you've mentioned, is having the money, but also the will, the vulnerability to get some of these very large-scale catalytic arts plans off the ground at a civic level. So some of the grand boulevards or the redevelopment, the corridors, the Olympics, whatever it may be, something big. So let's hit it at all of those levels. That's the dream, and I think we can do it. I think the support is here in this community.
Thank you. So I want to make sure that we thank all of our esteemed panelists. So if you wouldn't mind joining me in a round of applause. Thank you. And if you're anything like me, you probably, this conversation has just generated a whole list of additional questions that you have for some of our experts up here. So I would invite you to, continue the discussion in the lobby as you take in the artwork in the gallery, enjoy some of the delicious treats from Hrishka's Kolaches, a local business that's worked with our business development team. And thank you all for being here today. Everyone enjoy the rest of your afternoon.